The desert stretched endlessly in every direction. Twin suns burned in the sky, their merciless heat turning the sand into a scorching sea of gold. The air shimmered, making distant objects appear like ghosts that vanished upon approach. Captain Elias Ward stumbled forward, his breath heavy, his body weak. His ship had been shot down hours ago, and he had barely escaped the wreckage before the fuel ignited in a ball of fire. Now he was alone, stranded in the wastelands of Drenosphore, with only a half-broken beacon, a pistol, and a nearly empty canteen. Elias was a survivor, a soldier who had seen war across the stars. But even the most hardened warrior could not fight against thirst. His throat was dry, his lips cracked. He had to reach Outpost 17, an abandoned research station marked on his holomap. It was supposed to be 10 kilometers east. 10 kilometers in this heat felt like 100. As he moved forward, the wind picked up, carrying dust and ash. The desert was once an ocean, long before humanity arrived. Now it was nothing but bones and ruins of forgotten battles. The silence was unsettling. Even the scavengers that roamed most planets seemed to avoid this place. Then he saw something. A dark shape lay in the sand ahead. A body. At first, Elias thought it was a trick of the heat, but as he got closer, he realized it was real. A young woman, barely in her 20s, her clothes torn and burned as if she had survived an explosion. Her dark hair was tangled with sand, her face pale beneath a layer of dust. She wasn't dead. Not yet. Elias knelt beside her and checked for signs of life. Her pulse was weak but steady. He pulled out his canteen, hesitating. There was barely a sip of water left. If he drank it, he might survive long enough to reach the outpost. If he gave it to her, he might not. With a sigh, he uncapped the canteen and tilted it to her lips. "Drink," he said, his voice rough. The woman's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she seemed confused. Then her cracked lips parted, and she drank the last drops of water. Her breathing steadied, but she was still too weak to stand. Elias sat back, staring at the empty canteen. A part of him regretted the choice, but another part, the part that still believed in something greater than survival, told him he had done the right thing. "Can you walk?" he asked. The woman struggled to sit up. Her voice was hoarse when she spoke. "Where are we?" "Drenosphore. A few clicks from an old outpost. We need to get there before nightfall." The woman's eyes darted around the horizon. "Raiders." Elias nodded grimly. "Probably." The Exarethian Raiders were a brutal alien clan that hunted survivors on dying planets like this one. If they found the wreckage of his ship, they would soon come looking for him, and anyone else still alive. "I can walk," the woman said, though her body trembled as she tried to stand. Elias offered his arm, and she leaned on him. She was lighter than he expected, but there was strength in her grip. Whoever she was, she had been through a lot. "What's your name?" he asked as they started moving. "Lena," she said, her voice low. Elias didn't press for more. He had seen that look before, the look of someone carrying too many ghosts. As they walked, the sky above them darkened slightly. A sandstorm was forming on the horizon. It would be upon them within the hour. "We need to move faster," Elias said. Lena gritted her teeth and nodded. They pushed forward, step by step, through the burning sand. Every muscle in Elias's body ached. His throat begged for water, but he ignored the pain. Survival was all that mattered. After what felt like eternity, the shape of Outpost 17 came into view. A crumbling metal structure, half buried in the dunes. Relief flooded Elias, but it was short-lived. A low hum vibrated through the air. His soldier instincts kicked in. He grabbed Lena's arm and pulled her behind a broken metal wall, just as a shadow passed overhead. A sleek, dark ship hovered in the distance, a raider scout. They weren't alone. Elias pressed his back against the crumbling metal wall, holding his breath. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. The raider scout ship hovered in the distance, its dark shape cutting across the sky like a hungry predator. The ship's engines hummed, scanning the desert for survivors. If it spotted them, they were dead. Beside him, Lena crouched low, her breathing shallow. Her body was still weak from dehydration, but she was alert. Her sharp eyes followed the ship's slow movement. "They're searching for something," she whispered. "Yeah," Elias muttered. "Us." The Exarethian raiders were merciless. They didn't take prisoners, at least, not ones that remained human for long. Elias had seen what they did to captives. He refused to let that happen to either of them. The ship hovered for another minute, then slowly drifted further west, toward the wreckage of his crashed ship. Elias exhaled, wiping sweat from his brow. "We need to move. Now." Lena nodded. Together, they crept along the side of Outpost 17, careful not to make noise. The structure was old, built decades ago, when humans first tried to colonize Drenosphere. The desert had claimed it since then, burying most of it under layers of sand and rust. Elias found a half-broken entry hatch. With a grunt, he forced it open, revealing a dark corridor inside. The air smelled stale, thick with dust and decay. "No choice," he muttered. "Let's go." Lena followed, and the metal hatch slammed shut behind them. Inside, the outpost was silent. Too silent. Dim emergency lights flickered along the walls, casting long shadows across the rusted corridors. The place had been abandoned for years, but something about it still felt occupied. Lena shivered. "I don't like this place." "Me neither," Elias admitted. But outside was worse. They moved carefully, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. Sand had blown in through broken windows, forming small dunes along the floor. Old human equipment lay scattered. Broken monitors, shattered crates, and long-dead power cells. They entered a control room, where a dusty terminal sat on a rusted desk. Elias wiped the screen with his sleeve, revealing a faded holographic interface. "If we can power this up, maybe we can send a distress signal," he said. Lena inspected the console. "This tech is ancient, but I might be able to fix it." Elias raised an eyebrow. "You're good with machines." Lena shrugged. "I learned a few things." She pulled a small toolkit from her belt. Elias hadn't even noticed she had one. She got to work, carefully opening the panel beneath the console. Elias stood near the doorway, keeping watch. His mind kept drifting back to the raider ship outside. If they found his wrecked ship, they'd search the area. Time was running out. As he scanned the hallway, a sudden thud echoed from deeper inside the outpost. Elias froze. Lena looked up. What was that? He held up a hand, signaling her to stay quiet. His fingers tightened around his pistol. Slowly, he stepped into the hallway, scanning the shadows. Another sound, a soft scraping noise. Someone, or something, was in here with them. Elias motioned for Lena to stay put, then moved toward the noise. He turned a corner and found a metal door, slightly open. A trail of footprints in the dust led inside. He pushed the door wider. Inside was an old storage room, its shelves covered in rust. But in the corner, hunched over something, was a figure. It was a human. A man, dressed in ragged clothing, his face covered in dirt. The man spun around, his eyes wide with fear. "Please, don't shoot." Elias kept his gun raised. "Who are you?" The man swallowed hard. "Name's Kel. I've been hiding here for days." Lena appeared behind Elias. "You're a survivor?" Kel nodded quickly. "Yes. My crew was attacked by raiders a week ago. I escaped, but they took the others. I've been stuck here with no food, no water." Elias studied him. The man looked weak, but his desperation made him unpredictable. "Are there more raiders nearby?" Kel hesitated, then whispered, "They're coming. I heard their radio signals this morning. They know someone's alive out here." Elias cursed under his breath. Their time had just run out. Lena glanced between them. We need to get out of here. Kel's eyes lit up. You have a ship? No, Elias admitted. But we have a plan. Lena gestured to the console. If I can send a distress signal, we might get picked up before the raiders arrive. Kel looked nervous. And if the wrong people hear it? Elias gritted his teeth. Then we fight. A loud explosion suddenly shook the outpost. Sand and debris rained from the ceiling. Lena's face went pale. They found us. Elias cocked his pistol. Get that signal working. I'll buy us some time. Outside, the Exarathian raiders had arrived. A second explosion shook the outpost. Dust and metal debris rained from the ceiling. The sound of distant blaster fire echoed through the empty halls. Elias gritted his teeth. The Exarathian raiders had found them. No more hiding. No more running. He turned to Lena, who was still working on the console, her fingers moving quickly across the dusty controls. The old system flickered with weak light, struggling to stay active. How much longer? Elias asked, keeping his pistol ready. Lena's face was tight with concentration. The system is damaged. I can boost the signal, but it'll take a few minutes. Minutes they didn't have. Kel, the ragged survivor they had found, paced nervously near the doorway. We have to get out of here. There's no way we survive a fight against them. Elias ignored him. He peeked outside and saw shadows moving in the hallway. The raiders were already inside. They're coming, he whispered. Get ready. Lena didn't stop working. Almost there. Elias pressed himself against the wall, his soldier instincts kicking in. He counted 4 enemies, Exarathian scouts, armed with pulse rifles. They moved cautiously, scanning the halls. He had one chance. Elias aimed and fired. His first shot hit the lead raider, dropping him instantly. The others shouted, their weapons lighting up the hallway with green laser fire. Elias rolled behind cover, avoiding the deadly blasts. Kel screamed and ducked under a table. Lena shouted, "Signal's live. It's transmitting." Elias didn't have time to celebrate. He peeked out and fired 2 more shots. Another raider fell. The remaining 2 took cover, shouting in their alien tongue. Then one of them threw a shock grenade straight into the room. Move. Elias tackled Lena to the ground just as the grenade exploded, sending a wave of electricity through the air. Sparks flew. The console short-circuited. The lights flickered. Lena gasped. The signal. Forget it, Elias growled, getting to his feet. We need to fight. The last 2 raiders stormed inside, blades drawn, ready to kill. Elias blocked the first attack, using his pistol to deflect the blow. The second raider lunged at Lena. She barely dodged in time. Kel, still cowering, grabbed a rusted metal pipe and swung wildly at one of the raiders. He missed, but it was enough of a distraction for Elias to fire another shot, taking the alien down. The last raider hissed and charged at Lena. She grabbed a nearby tool and drove it straight into his chest. The alien gurgled before collapsing. Silence. Elias breathed heavily, checking his surroundings. The fight was over, but the damage was done. The console was destroyed. Their signal had gone out, but for how long? Had anyone heard it? Lena stood beside him, her hands trembling. Her clothes were torn, her face covered in dust, but her eyes burned with determination. Kel, still catching his breath, muttered, "We're dead. More will come." Elias turned to him. "Then we leave before they do." Lena wiped her forehead. "There's an old transport bay in the lower levels. If there's anything left down there, we might be able to escape." Elias nodded. "Then that's where we go." As they started moving, Kel hesitated. His eyes darted between Elias and Lena. His expression shifted, from fear to something else. Something dangerous. Elias noticed it too late. A sharp pain exploded in his side. Kel had stabbed him. Elias staggered back, gripping his wound. Blood oozed from the knife lodged in his ribs. Lena gasped. "What are you doing?" Kel's face twisted into a sneer. "I heard the raiders talking on their radios before you got here. They're offering a reward for survivors, especially a human soldier." Elias tried to raise his gun, but Kel knocked it away. "I was never going to die in this place," Kel hissed. "I just needed bait. And you two are perfect." Lena's hands curled into fists. "You, traitor." Kel lunged at her, but this time she was ready. She dodged his attack and grabbed a rusty crowbar from the floor. With one hard swing, she smashed it into Kel's head. He dropped instantly, blood pooling beneath him. Elias collapsed against the wall, breathing heavily, his vision blurred, pain burning through his body. Lena rushed to his side. "Stay with me. We have to go." Elias gritted his teeth. "You hit him pretty hard." Lena forced a smile. "Guess I learned from the best." Outside, the sound of engines rumbled. More raider ships were landing. They had seconds before the next attack. Lena pulled Elias to his feet. "We're not dying here." Elias, despite the pain, smirked. "Then let's move." With death on their heels, they ran. The metallic hallways of Outpost 17 trembled as another explosion echoed outside. The raiders were getting closer. Elias's vision blurred, pain pulsing from the wound in his side. Blood seeped through his shirt, but he forced himself to move. Lena kept her arm around him, practically dragging him forward. "You have to stay awake," she said urgently. "We're almost there." Their only hope was the transport bay in the lower levels. If there was a working ship down there, they might still escape. Behind them, the body of Kel lay motionless. The man who had betrayed them was gone, but his actions had nearly doomed them. Elias gritted his teeth. He wasn't going to die here. Not today. The descent. They reached a rusted elevator shaft. The doors were half open, revealing a dark abyss below. The control panel was dead. Lena sighed. "Figures. We climb down." Elias groaned. "Great." Lena went first, grabbing the old ladder along the shaft. Sand and dust fell as she climbed down into the darkness. Elias took a deep breath. Every movement sent sharp pain through his body, but he gripped the ladder tightly and followed. Halfway down, a loud roar filled the air. Raider engines. Elias looked up. Through a crack in the wall, he saw a massive raider dropship landing near the outpost. More of them were coming. "Faster, Lena," he urged. She dropped down onto the lower platform and looked around urgently. "Come on, Captain." Elias's strength was fading, but he forced himself down the last few rungs. He barely hit the ground before his legs buckled. Lena caught him. "You're losing too much blood." "I'll live," Elias muttered. "Just find us a way out." The forgotten hangar. They stepped into a massive underground hangar, buried beneath the sand for decades. Rows of rusted ships filled the space, most of them broken or missing parts. The dim emergency lights flickered, revealing the remains of an ancient evacuation fleet. Lena scanned the area. "There has to be something we can use." Elias leaned against a crate, trying to stay conscious. The world was spinning. He pressed his hand against his wound, but it wasn't stopping the bleeding. Lena ran ahead, checking the ships. One after another, she found nothing but useless wrecks. Then, "I got something," she shouted. Elias forced himself to his feet and staggered toward her. She stood beside a small scout ship, its hull mostly intact. "The engine still works," she said, pulling open a panel. "It's old, but I can start it." Elias collapsed into the co-pilot's seat. "Then do it. Fast." Lena worked quickly, rewiring the controls. The ship's systems flickered to life. The engines rumbled weakly, struggling to wake from their long slumber. Elias exhaled in relief, just as a blast shook the hangar. The raiders had found them. The final stand. Lena cursed. "They're coming." Elias pushed himself up, his pistol heavy in his hand. He turned toward the entrance and saw 3 raiders rushing in, their weapons glowing. Elias didn't hesitate. He fired the first shot, hitting the closest raider in the chest. The alien fell, but the others dodged and returned fire. Lena ducked as lasers tore through the ship's hull. "I need 30 more seconds." Elias gritted his teeth. He could barely stand, but he had to keep them off her. He fired again, forcing the raiders into cover. One of them threw a plasma grenade. Elias saw it too late. The grenade exploded, sending him flying. He crashed against the ship's ramp, pain tearing through his body. Lena screamed. Elias. He tried to move, but everything felt distant. His vision darkened. Then, the ship's engines roared to life. Lena had done it. She grabbed Elias's arm, pulling him inside the cockpit. The ship lifted off just as more raiders stormed the hangar. Laser fire rained down, but Lena punched the thrusters, sending the ship rocketing through the hangar doors. They burst into the open desert sky, sandstorms swirling beneath them. Lena didn't stop. She pushed the engines to full power, escaping the outpost as raider ships pursued them. Elias, barely conscious, managed a weak smile. "You did it." Lena's eyes were fierce. "We're not safe yet." The raiders were still chasing them, and Elias was still dying. The small scout ship shook violently as Lena pushed its engines to the limit. The sandstorm raged below, and behind them, 3 raider ships were closing in fast. Elias lay slumped in the co-pilot's seat, his face pale. Blood still oozed from his side, staining his shirt. His breathing was shallow, his body weak. Lena gripped the controls tightly, her heart pounding. She had gotten them out of the outpost, but they weren't safe yet. The raiders weren't going to let them escape so easily. A loud beeping filled the cockpit. Lena glanced at the screen. Incoming missile lock. She jerked the controls hard, sending the ship into a sharp dive. The missile streaked past them, exploding in a bright flash. Elias groaned, his head rolling to the side. His eyes barely opened. "Lena." "Stay with me," she said, her voice tight with fear. He gave a weak smile. "I hate flying like this." Lena ignored the lump in her throat. She didn't have time to feel anything. The raiders fired again. Bright green lasers shot past the ship, some grazing the hull. The ship's systems flickered, alarms blaring. Lena cursed. "This old bucket won't last long." She checked the navigation screen. There was a canyon system ahead, deep and winding. If she could reach it, she could lose their pursuers. She pushed the thrusters forward, heading straight for the canyons. The raiders followed. The canyon chase. The ship plunged into the canyon at high speed, dodging sharp rock formations and twisting through narrow pathways. Lena's hands were steady, but her mind raced. One wrong move, and they would crash. The raiders weren't slowing down. They fired again. A blast struck the right wing, sending sparks through the cockpit. The ship lurched to the side. Elias groaned, barely conscious. Lena gritted her teeth. She had to lose them. She spotted a narrow tunnel ahead, just big enough for their ship. She dived toward it. The first raider ship followed, but it was too big. It clipped the canyon wall, spiraling out of control before exploding in a massive fireball. 1 down, 2 to go. The other raiders adjusted their course, chasing her deeper into the maze of rocks. Lena took sharp turns, flying dangerously close to the canyon walls. She had to outfly them. A second raider ship tried to fire, but it miscalculated a turn and slammed into the rocks, shattering on impact. Lena's hand shook, but she didn't stop. Only 1 raider left. The last enemy ship was faster, more skilled. It stayed close, matching her every move. Lena's ship wasn't going to last much longer. She needed a plan. She scanned the terrain ahead. Then she saw it. A narrow gap between 2 massive rock formations. She took a deep breath and aimed straight for it. The enemy pilot saw the maneuver and followed, thinking he could make it. Lena waited until the last second. Then she rolled the ship sideways, slipping through the gap. The raider wasn't so lucky. His ship smashed into the rock, exploding into a ball of fire. Silence filled the cockpit. The radar screen was clear. They had won. A desperate hope. Lena let out a shaky breath. She had done it. But there was no time to celebrate. Elias was barely clinging to life. His breathing was shallow, his skin cold and sweaty. Lena swallowed hard. "Hang on, Captain. We're almost safe." She checked the star map. The nearest settlement was a small colony station, about 30 minutes away. Would he last that long? Lena refused to think about the worst. She reached over, pressing a hand against his wound, trying to slow the bleeding. "Just a little longer, okay?" Elias gave a faint smirk. "You never listen, do you?" Lena forced a laugh. "Nope." She engaged the hyperdrive, and the stars stretched into lines as they jumped toward safety. The final gamble. The colony station was small, barely more than a trading outpost, but it had a medical bay. Lena brought the ship down hard, skidding into a rough landing. She didn't care. She unbuckled, rushing to Elias. "Stay awake," she begged, shaking him gently. His eyes fluttered, but he was losing consciousness. Lena ran to the exit, slamming the hatch open. A group of colonists and medics turned in surprise. "He's hurt," Lena shouted. "I need help." The medics sprang into action, lifting Elias onto a stretcher and rushing him inside. Lena followed, her heart pounding. As they worked on him, she could only stand there, her fists clenched. She had fought so hard to get him here. Now his fate was out of her hands. She could only hope. Lena paced back and forth outside the small colony medical bay. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her hands were clenched into fists. She had done everything she could. Now it was up to the doctors. Through the glass window, she could see Elias lying on the medical bed. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. The doctors moved quickly, working to stop the bleeding and stabilize him. Lena felt helpless. She had flown through a storm, fought off raiders, and risked everything to get him here. But now, all she could do was wait. A voice pulled her out of her thoughts. "You brought him in just in time." Lena turned to see an older man in a white medical coat. His expression was serious, but there was a small hint of relief in his eyes. "He's still critical, but we've managed to stop the bleeding," the doctor continued. "His body is weak, but he's a fighter. He has a chance." Lena exhaled, a weight lifting from her chest. "Can I see him?" she asked. The doctor hesitated. "Not yet. He needs rest, but I promise we're doing everything we can." Lena nodded and stepped back. She knew Elias wasn't out of danger yet, but at least there was hope. A mysterious offer. As she walked outside, the cool night air brushed against her skin. The colony was small but active, with traders, mechanics, and workers moving about. Lena needed a plan. The raiders wouldn't stop. If they found out Elias was still alive, they would come after him. She had to get him out of here before that happened. "Rough day," a voice said behind her. Lena spun around, her hand instinctively reaching for her blaster. A tall woman in a dark cloak stood in the shadows. She had sharp eyes and an air of confidence. "Who are you?" Lena asked, not lowering her guard. The woman smiled. "Just someone who knows trouble when she sees it." Lena narrowed her eyes. "And what do you want?" The woman stepped closer, her voice lowering. "I know who you are, and I know who he is." Lena's heartbeat quickened. "I don't know what you're talking about." The woman chuckled. "Relax. I'm not here to turn you in. In fact, I might be able to help." Lena stayed silent, waiting. "I have a ship," the woman continued. "Fast, unregistered. If you want to get him out of here before the raiders come looking, I can make that happen." Lena studied her carefully. "And what's the price?" The woman smirked. Let's just say I have my own reasons for wanting to see the Raiders lose. Lena wasn't sure if she could trust her, but she was running out of options. Before she could decide, an alarm blared across the colony. A warning siren. Her stomach dropped. Something was coming. The attack begins. Lena turned to the sky, and her worst fear was confirmed. A Raider dropship was approaching, its engines glowing in the night. "They found us," she muttered. The woman beside her remained calm. "Looks like your decision just got a lot easier." Lena didn't hesitate. She ran back inside the medical bay. "We have to move him now," she told the doctor. The doctor looked alarmed. "He's not strong enough to be moved." Lena grabbed Elias's stretcher, her voice urgent. "If we stay, he dies." The doctor hesitated, then nodded. "All right, I'll help you." Together, they lifted Elias and hurried toward the back exit. Outside, the woman was waiting with a small hover transport. "Get in." Lena and the doctor placed Elias inside, and she climbed in after him. The woman jumped into the driver's seat and hit the accelerator. The transport sped away just as the Raiders landed at the colony's front gates. Gunfire erupted behind them. The colony's defenders were fighting back, but Lena knew they wouldn't last long. Their only hope was to escape before the Raiders realized where they had gone. The final chase. The transport raced across the desert, kicking up sand. Lena sat beside Elias, holding his hand. His eyes fluttered open, and he looked at her weakly. "Where are we?" he murmured. "Getting you to safety," Lena said. "Just hold on." His grip tightened slightly, as if he knew how much danger they were in. The woman driving the transport glanced at the radar. "Bad news. They're following us." Lena turned. In the distance, 2 Raider speeders were closing in. She clenched her jaw. They weren't safe yet. She grabbed her blaster and climbed to the back of the transport. The Raiders were getting closer. Lena took aim and fired. One of the speeders swerved, barely missing her shot. They returned fire, and a laser blast grazed the side of the transport. Elias groaned in pain. Lena's anger flared. She aimed carefully and fired again. This time, her shot hit the engine of one of the speeders. It exploded in a ball of fire, flipping over and crashing into the sand. One left. The last Raider sped up, trying to get beside them. A Raider soldier leaped onto the transport, landing right in front of Lena. She barely had time to react before he swung a blade at her. Lena dodged, rolling back. The Raider attacked again, but she blocked him with her blaster. The fight was fast, brutal. One mistake, and she was dead. The Raider lunged again. Lena ducked and fired point blank. The Raider fell, his body tumbling off the transport. She turned to see the last speeder still chasing them. The woman in the driver's seat pulled a lever, and a hidden turret popped up. She pressed a button. A missile shot out, hitting the last speeder dead on. The explosion lit up the desert night. Lena collapsed beside Elias, breathing hard. They had survived. For now. But the fight wasn't over yet. The night was cold, but Lena's body burned with exhaustion. The transport had finally stopped near a rocky outcrop, hidden from sight. The mystery woman, who had helped them escape, climbed out of the driver's seat and scanned the horizon. "We lost them. For now." Lena let out a breath of relief but didn't relax. She turned to Elias, who lay on the stretcher, still unconscious. His breathing was uneven, his body weak. He needed proper medical treatment, and soon. The doctor checked his vitals. "He's stable for now, but he won't survive much longer without better care." Lena clenched her fists. She had fought so hard to save him, but the danger wasn't over yet. She looked at the woman. "You said you had a ship." The woman nodded. "A small one. It's docked at an old mining station a few kilometers from here." Lena's heart pounded. If they could reach that ship, they could finally escape this cursed planet. But she knew the Raiders wouldn't stop chasing them. She turned to the doctor. Can you keep him alive until we reach the ship? The doctor nodded. I'll do my best. Lena took a deep breath. This was it. One last fight. A desperate journey. They loaded Elias back onto the transport and started moving toward the mining station. The journey was tense. Lena kept her blaster ready, scanning the desert for any sign of the raiders. The mining station came into view. An old, abandoned structure, rusted and worn down by time. A small ship was docked nearby, its engines powered down. Lena felt a small spark of hope. They were almost there. But then, a loud explosion shattered the silence. Lena turned just in time to see a raider attack ship descending from the sky. The enemy had found them. Get him to the ship, Lena shouted. The doctor and the woman grabbed Elias's stretcher and rushed toward the ship. Lena spun around, raising her blaster. The raiders were already jumping off their ship, weapons drawn. She took cover behind a crate and opened fire. The final battle had begun. The last battle. The raiders advanced, their weapons flashing in the darkness. Lena fired shot after shot, taking down the first two enemies, but more kept coming. The woman joined the fight, shooting from the ship's ramp. We need to take off now. Lena gritted her teeth. They needed time. A raider sniper took position on the attack ship, aiming right at the mining station. Lena spotted him and acted fast. She sprinted toward an old tower, climbed up the metal structure, and aimed her blaster at the sniper. One perfect shot. The sniper fell. Lena jumped down just as another explosion rocked the ground. The raiders weren't stopping. She rushed back to the ship. The engines were powering up. The doctor had Elias secured inside. He's still breathing. Lena ran up the ramp, blasting the last raider who tried to board. The woman hit the controls, and the ship lifted off the ground, rising into the sky. Below, the raiders fired desperately, but they were too late. The ship soared into the stars, leaving the battle behind. They had won. The truth in the stars. The ship cruised through the quiet void of space. The danger was gone, but Lena's heart still felt heavy. She sat beside Elias, watching him breathe. Slowly, his eyes opened, weak but alive. Lena smiled. You made it, Captain. Elias let out a weak chuckle. Barely. His eyes studied her, something unspoken between them. Then, in a soft voice, he asked, Who are you? Lena's chest tightened. For years, she had searched for answers. Now she had found them in the most unexpected way. She took a deep breath and finally said the words she had never spoken before. I'm your daughter. Silence. Elias stared at her, his tired eyes filled with shock, realization, and something else. Regret. Lena swallowed hard. I never knew my father. I only had a name and a few old stories. But when I found you, I didn't know how to tell you. Elias's breath was shaky. All this time. Lena looked away. I thought I was just helping an old captain. But the more I fought to save you, the more I realized I wasn't just fighting for a leader. Her voice softened. I was fighting for my father. Elias closed his eyes, his face filled with emotions he couldn't put into words. After a long pause, he reached out, his hand trembling. Lena hesitated, then took it. For the first time, Elias held his daughter's hand. The war was over. The battles were behind them. Now, they had a future to build. Together.